I know many companies, and meaning because the representation in the group was so heavy, have said they've started work, but I don't think we have found work or found solutions to say that we are not polluting the world with e-waste. So ICT is great, but we need to handle and manage this. I think next slide, please. What we've done is we actually created what is called ICT Eco-Sustainability Wheel. And I think this is important for the group to understand that we said what were the elements, and we decided on the advocacy was required for government and companies, which is moving from boardrooms down, moving from governments down. Then was the question of how do we actually use benchmarking, how do we then move it on to actually measuring, how do we then deploy the technologies, then how do we actually monetize it, and how do we comply and manage it. So I think this was what is called the sustainability, eco-sustainability wheel, meaning we have a subject, which is the new subject, and a lot of it is discussed. It's called naturenomics. Naturenomics is actually the new paradigm of what we call the measurable factors of old economics. And in the new economics, unless you had the component of nature with the nomics bit, it wouldn't really apply. We're not going into details of that, but we did say that measurability based on naturenomics was actually relevant. Next, please. Innovation of products, I think this was critical and key. You saw the teleconferencing yesterday. It is actually addressing somewhat the bottom of the pyramid, not necessarily to the whole world, but that's for $150. You can actually have it on your sort of laptop. I feel like a HP salesman right now, but that's what actually they did. It was $150 on your laptop, and that's what you can actually teleconference with nowadays, with a bit of hardware change. So I'm saying that's the kind of innovation that is paradigm, that's the kind of innovation that will help less carbon footprints, that will help you travel less and yet be as effective. Then there was this whole thing on cloud computing. Now, if for many of you, meaning I do not want to go into the area of description because you may know it, but cloud computing essentially is nothing but computing in the air. So, you know, your bandwidth problems are solved. There are issues regarding security, etc., but the concept of cloud computing needs to be innovated even more so that space is managed and there is less debris lying around. Next was laser-based projection. This was one thing that sort of was discussed. Laser-based projection was nothing but your cell phones, meaning which now are a convergent technology where you can download almost any kind of content, would actually soon be able to display on a wall, if you put on a switch, would be able to project on a wall just through your handheld device as to what you want, something in the area of laser computing. Then there was this whole thing called Earth Technologies. Meaning the acronym is SENSE. And basically SENSE is nothing but measuring Earth technologies in a way on pollution and non-pollution. Then there was digital printing. There was advanced meter ecosystems for managing water leakages, management of water and sewage, actually. Then there was waste management technologies and energy management for networks, which also led on to smart grids. Next, please. The smart ICT in urban areas was really focused on 50 million devices by 2020. Smart gridding for urban people required to manage their entire lifestyle, which is travel, logistics, housing, energy, water, entertainment, and deployment of ICT in city management and planning. That means most of the world, 75% of the people would be dependent on this ICT business, and this would actually have less carbon footprinting. Last slide, please. Last two slides, sorry. The last but not least is regulation and government based on subsidies and incentives, CapEx, to make the existing data centers, which is really talking about mitigation, and then talking about adaptation, which is discounts given to utilities which were moving on to the next phase. Next. I think there was also an area discussed around programmatic subsidies used for ICT to reduce emissions, and there was a link-specific mandates to use ICT to develop holistic fiscal structures that encourage industries to use ICT to reduce their carbon footprint. So there were two different areas, but nevertheless, ICT used with heavy subsidies, if not heavy, at least subsidies for the future. I think that really summarizes, meaning what our group did. Last but not least, I think compliance management was essential for managing and frameworking the components of ICT. Thank you. Sorry, I overshot.
Thank you very much. Innovation, technology requires a lot of funds, requires adequate investment, mainly when it comes to the field of climate change. And we have seen that this was very clear in Copenhagen, even though there has been no clear agreement. It was very clear that we do need funds to move ahead. So, Mr. Mohammed Al-Ashri, what have been the conclusions in relation to the subject in terms of finance and investments?
All right, thank you. We go from a high-tech presentation to a low-tech presentation on a big subject like finance and investment. We were discussing in our group finance and investment for transforming the 20th century economy to a 21st century low-carbon or green economy. Identified a number of barriers to these needed investments and recommended some solutions. So some examples of the barriers. Investors have a responsibility to direct their capital towards corporations that incorporate ESG ideals. Another one, the short-term investment horizon for some investors acts as a barrier to low-carbon investments. One recommended solution is encouraging institutional investors, such as pension funds and government investments, to incorporate these two challenges into their considerations may help to generate a critical mass. Another barrier is while there is a potential reward for engaging in low-carbon solutions, the penalty for inaction is insignificant. The solution, or solutions, is that an international framework for dealing with climate change and the price on carbon are essential to send a long-term signal about future policy direction. Also, on a macro level, so to speak, this is on a macro level, on a smaller or micro level, there is a need for consistent rules for ESG, which does not necessarily mean, as some in the group argued, more regulation in order to create the certainty required to stimulate investment. Another barrier, even though the majority of future energy infrastructure will be in developing countries, most foreign private investment is focused on a select few of these countries. A solution, the use of public funds, and that could bring Copenhagen fast start funds of the $10 billion a year for the next 3 years into action. So the use of such public funds can be crucial in removing barriers to private investment in developing countries through guarantees, risk sharing, buying down interests, etc., and to building institutional capacity and to fund adaptation and forestry measures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Certainly, a certain number of series of ideas that Mexico would have to take over in COP16 in order to see how we can have more practical recommendation, at least better than the one of Copenhagen, a huge challenge on Mexico. And later on, we will hear from Mr. Adrian Fernandez how they would be coping with that. Climate change, energy, the relation is simple, and huge expectation not only from energy efficiency, but from renewable energy, a huge market. And there are huge prospects, but people don't know exactly how far we can go to that, and in order to respond to the challenges. So, Mrs. Angelina Galiteva, what has been your conclusions?